black thing go from left to right, and I thought, I'm going to die out here. No one's ever going to know. I couldn't believe what my eyeballs were showing me. I'll never forget how evil the eyes were. It was horrible. I mean, I've never seen nothing that evil.
It ran towards me at a rate that I can't even explain. Turned and stared at me, and this look of, I just want to kill you. I want to say it was human, but it wasn't.
He was yelling at me to grab a gun. I was like, for what? He said, just grab a gun. And there's footprints all the way to the door of my house. It had went inside my garage, all the way to the door.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Zio!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
You're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles. Check us out online at sasquatchchronicles.com. If you've had an encounter, email me. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. Jam-packed, actually. We'll be talking to Rich, and Rich comes to us from Southwest Texas, and he had an encounter when he was out fishing. We'll also be talking to Garnett. Garnett comes from upstate New York, and she's had a lot of strange things going on and around her property for the last couple of years, but she did see the creature walking across a field. It's very fascinating to hear what Garnett has to say, some of the different things going on and around that property, including family members that had encounters. There's a lot of strange things in this world that you can run into outside of, Bigfoot's weird enough, but there's a lot of strange things that you can run into. And I was talking to Fabian off the air, and he was telling me about this encounter with, I guess you'll have to listen to it, a witch, a demon. I'm not really sure what these guys ran into. I'll let Fabian tell the story and you decide. Probably one of the more fascinating, strange stories I've heard in a while, and I'm so glad that Fabian was willing to come on and share it. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Before we get into Bigfoot, let's talk to Fabian. Fabian, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate you being here tonight.
Yeah, man, no problem. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, after what you told me, what happened to you and your buddy, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And again, thank you so much for being here. But if you would you just kind of start from the very beginning? Tell us what you ran into. What did you see?
Yeah, sure. One night, me and a couple buddies of mine, went out, hanging out, a couple bars, had a couple drinks. My buddy, we took his car and he wasn't able to drive. I had another friend with us, I dropped him off, prior. So when we were on our way to drop my buddy off, drop him and his car off so I could take my car and go home. Whenever I made the block to get to his house, on the street to get to his house, I noticed that there was a car parking in his front yard and the car was running. And it had to been about 3 o'clock in the morning. And, I just thought it was strange. I looked over to my buddy and I'm just like, hey, Jimmy, like, who's at your house? Is anybody waiting on you? And he says, no, why? I said, dude, look, there's a car parked in front of your driveway in your front yard and it's running. And he just kept brushing it off. So, I brush it off too, could be anybody. So I pull up to his driveway and, we start having a conversation and I look over and I see that this car is still there, almost like they were waiting on us. More, I feel so that they were waiting on my buddy. So, he's still talking and I kind of cut him off. I'm just like, hey, do you know who this is, who these people are? Because they're still there. And I think they're waiting on you. And when I told him that, he just got real rowdy, real offensive, and he jumped out of his car. He ran to his front yard, and he's peeking into the window of the car, and he's just like almost challenging these guys. He's just like, hey, who's this car? Who are you? It was just very strange. He's in his front yard, and he's yelling at this car. He's asking for someone to come out. Who's parked in my front yard? And nobody comes out. And, I was kind of, scared. I didn't know what to think of it. I thought, there are a few thugs or goons packed in this SUV about to jump my buddy. So I get out of his car. I walk over to my car because, I had a knife in my driver's seat in the pocket at the time. So I get into my car. When I opened my door, my buddy, he looked over to me and he threw his hand out, signaling me to stop. So I stopped and I said, what? And he said, no, don't go anywhere. I said, I'm not going anywhere. Just go in my car. And, he said, okay. And he's still standing there. And I get in my car and I am gripping this knife because I feel like the worst is going to happen. I'm ready for all four of these doors to open up and just, for these guys to jump my buddy, beat him up. And I'm looking at this SUV, just anticipating for a door to open. Well, finally, a door opens. It's the driver's side door. It opens up. This car was parked in his front yard underneath the street light, and the light was beaming off the car. And when this, person walked out of the car, the first thing that I saw was the silhouette of the hairline. I automatically knew that it was a female. And when I noticed that it was a female, I was kind of at ease. I loosened up the grip on the knife, put the knife down. Like, okay, I'll have nothing to worry about. The worst thing that's going to happen is that, this chick beats up my buddy for whatever reason. I don't know. And at the same time, all I saw was the hairline. I didn't necessarily see a face. It was just a dark black object. But the closer that this object got around the car, the more that its being was being revealed into the light. And when it got closer to us, when it stepped 2 feet in the driveway, what we saw was a lady or a woman. She had to have been in her 20s, early 20s, but her skin and her face, everything was just so pale about this lady. And she was wearing this purple prom dress. What seemed to be a purple prom dress, and it was very sparkling. It was a very sparkling prom dress, and you couldn't miss it. It was sparkling so much. And I'm just thinking, like, what in the heck is going on? And she kind of stands there, and she looks at my buddy, and, she kind of backs away, and she starts walking towards the house next to us, and she just stands there in front of their yard. And I look at my buddy, I'm just like, Jimmy, who is that? What's going on? And he kind of looks at me, and, I can tell, there's still some alcohol in his system because he's laughing. And I'm getting creeped out. He's laughing. And I said, dude, what's going on? Why are you laughing? Who is this? And he's just repeatedly saying, I don't know. And he's laughing. And I'm creeped, right? And I said, dude, what do we do? What's going on, bro? And he just looked at me. He looks at me. He's like, I'm going to go get, my last Four Loko out of my trunk. He had, some an alcoholic beverage in his trunk. He wanted to get the last of it. So he goes over to his trunk. He opens up his trunk. He's digging into his trunk. He has his back is faced towards the street. Okay. So at this time, I'm looking at him, and then I look back over to the street, and I see that this lady is still in the front yard of the neighbor's house. And she has her palms opened up towards her face. And I see like this beam of light glowing from her hands. And I honestly would like to think it was just her phone or something. But I mean, it just that the light that was coming out of her hands didn't like it was coming out from a phone, So I was just real creeped. And I look back at my buddy, he's still digging in his trunk. And as I turn back around, I see that this female is walking back up towards the driveway. But this time was when she was walking up the drive. I wouldn't even call it walking. It was almost like she was gliding. But at the same time, she was doing it with a purpose. Like she had something that she wanted from my buddy Jimmy. She wanted something he had, she wanted. But also, too, at the same time, she never really showed any type of emotions in her face. It was almost like it was lifeless. She never said a word. And another thing is, like, she never acknowledged me. Everything, her entire purpose, everything that she wanted was from my buddy Jimmy. And I was just creeped out. And when she was coming up towards the driveway, all this time, I wanted to say something. You know, I wanted to say something like, "Hey, who are you? Can we help you? What do you want?" But I felt like I couldn't say anything. I was almost like I was out of the picture almost. I was stuck. I couldn't say anything. So I'm watching this happen with my own eyes. She gets up to him and she just stands there. She's just standing there, and she has these big eyes, these big round eyes that it almost looks like it was about to pop out of her face. And she was just staring at him. One of the creepiest things I've ever seen in my life. And my buddy finally gets his Four Loko that he's getting out of his trunk. As soon as he turns around, she swiftly turns back around and walks back into the street. And then when she gets to the street, she makes a complete circle, and then she stands there and looks at my buddy once more. And I don't know what to say or what's going on. She goes back into her car, closes the car door, and she slowly drives away. My buddy, and by the way, he didn't know she was staring at him until I told him after the fact. So as she's driving off slowly, he gets into the street, and he's just like yelling at the car, challenging it again, like, you know, this and that, whatever. And as he's saying all this stuff, the car stops, and it stops for a good little minute. And now he looks at me, and I'm looking at him, and I'm scared because I don't know what's about to happen. I'm even more scared. And he didn't know what to do. And she slowly continued to keep going forward. And I look back at my buddy, and I'm just like, dude, I don't know what that was, but that was the creepiest thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm getting in my car, and I'm going home. And as I was doing so, he stopped me and said, "No, wait, let me go get a pack of cigarettes out of my car, and you can go." The entire time he's stuttering. You know, I'll get my cigarettes, and that'll be the cue. You can go. I said, okay, cool. So he goes in his car. He's digging for his cigarettes. And I'm waiting for the cue. And all of a sudden, I swear on my life, I heard his younger brother scream out, "Mom," as if he was in need of help. I get out of my car. I said, "Jimmy, did you not hear that?" He said, "What?" I said, "Your little brother just yelled out for your mom." And again, he got really offensive. And he said, "No, you didn't. No, you didn't." And he's shaking his head. And I said, "You know what? I'm done, bro. I'm out of here." I get in my car. I pull out the driveway. And he has a bowling alley that's across the street from him. So I'm leaving his street. And I notice that he's following me. So I park into the bowling alley. I pull in. I park. He pulls in right on the side of me. And when he pulls up on the side of me, and I roll down my window, he rolls down his window. He is in tears, just eyes bawling. And I look at him and I said, "You know what? I want to help you, but you got to tell me, are you still messing with any of that dark stuff that you used to mess with back in the day? The Ouija boards, all of it. You got to let me know this." And he said he hasn't been messing with it. He's left it alone. And he said he couldn't be by himself. He said he didn't want to go back to his house by himself. You know, and I said, "Well, you can't go back home with me. My mom just bought a new house, and you're not going to bring this bad energy with you." And, you know, I kind of just thought on the fly, like, okay, well, how about I bring you to the buddy that we dropped off prior? And that's what we did. You know, he gets in my car. You know, I'm trying to calm him down because he's just all over the place. Crying, he couldn't talk, stuttering. And we get to the street light, a red light, and, you know, we're talking, and he kind of just stops the conversation. And I said, what's wrong? And he looks at me, and he's stuttering again, and he's just saying, "Turn around." I said, "What?" I look at my rearview mirror, and I swear, I promise you, this is the same SUV that was parked in front of his house, and now it's right behind us. So now I lose my shit, and I'm just like, dude, I was trying to be brave for the both of us, and now I'm about to lose it. And I look at him, I said, you know what? I'm going to make this right turn. If it follows us, we're in trouble. If it continues straight, we have nothing to worry about. I'm trying to be strong for the both of us. Eventually, I make this right turn, and the car kept going straight. It didn't follow us. And, you know, I'm my head and my heart, I'm just like, thank you, God. And he's still just crying, and he has this scripture tattooed on his bicep, and he's trying to read it. He couldn't even finish it. It wasn't even a long scripture, and he couldn't finish it. He kept getting stuck. So we eventually make it to our other buddy's house. I call him. He comes outside. I tell him the entire story of what happened. He gets creeped out. He wants nothing to do with him. He says, hey, you know, he has to go back home. And I said, yeah, I agree. I can't bring him to my mom's house. So my buddy goes back in his house. You know, he was scared to go back to his house, you know, and, you know, he wasn't even a part of it. And so it's just me and my buddy Jimmy. We're in the car. And I look at him and say, hey, like, you got to call your family. You got to call your dad, your mom, your brother and sister. Someone has to pick up because I can't bring you back with me. And, you know, he goes through his phone and he's calling his mom. He's calling his dad. He's calling his brother, his sister. Nobody answers. I'm just like, oh, my gosh, you know. His mom did end up calling back, and he answered the phone. And, you know, she asked him, hey, what's going on? Are you okay? And he didn't say a word. He was shook. He couldn't talk. And I tried to say something, but she had already hung up. So then I said, no, this is not going to happen. So I took his phone. I called his mom back. She answered. And, you know, I told her everything. And she said, yeah, my husband said he saw y'all through the blinds. But he said he only saw Jimmy in the car. And I said, okay. I said, well, I know I'm going to bring him back, you know, and I have his car parked at the bowling alley. She said, that's okay. Just come back. We'll be waiting for y'all. We'll be out in the front yard. Make it back to his house. His parents are waiting in the front yard, like they said. And he's still shook. He goes with his mom, and she brings him inside. His dad comes with me because I have to go back to the bowling alley to pick up their car. And, you know, we come back to the house. And the last thing that his dad told me at that time was, you know, hey, I know Jimmy's been drinking. Have you been drinking? I said, no, sir. At the time, I wasn't drinking. But, you know, he had asked me if I was drinking. I said, no, sir, I don't do any of that. You can ask your wife. She knows me very well. He said, okay. He said, well, the sheriff that lives across the street, he has cameras in his front yard. You know, we can go over it tomorrow and see what really happened. And I said, okay, you know, fair enough. That was like on a Friday or Saturday. I remember going back to work the next day, and I mean, this thing it stayed in my mind. It haunted me, creeped me out. I couldn't be alone. I was freaking sleeping with my younger brother. You know, it was just insane. I was scared that I was going to run into this thing again, and I eventually make it back and meet up with them back at their house. And you know, me, Jimmy, and his mom, we're out in their patio, and we're talking. And you know, Jimmy gets up and he goes to the restroom. And me and his mom are talking, and she says, so do you know about the psychics? And I said, psychics? She said, yeah. I said, well, you know, he told me how he went to go see one. And she was like, yeah, but he won't stop seeing her, and that she knows that the psychic that he's seeing, you know, can do bad stuff. And, you know, she just believes that she put a lot of, you know, negative energy on him. And I said, okay. And I said, well, do you know about the Ouija board stuff that he used to mess with? And she said, no. And I said, yeah, you know, around the time we graduated high school, he was really big into that kind of stuff. And, you know, we just came to the conclusion that, you know, he was digging so much into the stuff that it finally, you know, came back knocking on the door. And I guess they wanted something from him. I don't know. And, you know, he gets back. And she also had pointed out to me that because he ended up sleeping with her in the room that night, and she took his phone because she wanted to go through it, make sure everything was okay. Well, she told me, well, you did try calling this, right? So, yeah, he called all of y'all. And she said, well, she said, I looked at the call log last night, and I noticed a number that stood out to me. And I said, oh, well, what number was that? And she looked at me and she said, somebody dialed 666. And I said, no, ma'am, no way. I need to see this for myself because I won't believe it otherwise. And she said she would show it to me, but she had deleted it. She erased it out of the phone because she also too is very religious. She doesn't play with any of that stuff, so she took it out of the phone. I said, okay, fair enough. And she ended up going back into the house. Me and her kind of made a conclusion that this was, I guess, some type of witch or something that's just been lurking out in the neighborhood or something. I don't know. And, now it's just me and Jimmy, and I'm just like, what do we do? And he said, well, we could look over at the cameras tomorrow. And I said, okay, well, I'm gonna be busy with work. So, whatever y'all see, just, give me a call and let me know. And he said, okay, yeah. So, again, I just went back, home, working, and I was haunted at work. I couldn't do anything at work. I was just, my boss at the time was making jokes, laughing at me, letting me know, like, hey, don't go messing with any witches, and I'm just like, oh, dude, leave me alone. So it's funny because we didn't actually meet up afterwards. Well, we didn't schedule, a meeting, but I ended up going to a Walgreens, and I ran into him at a Walgreens, and it was him and another buddy of ours, Xavier. And I knew Xavier had seen the footage with him. So I pulled Xavier off to the side. I said, hey, can you tell me what you saw on that camera? Because I know Jimmy either is going to over exaggerate or not tell me everything. And he said, yeah, man. Yeah, I'll tell you. And I said, okay. And he's trying to tell me, but I'm so anxious and I wanted to know. So I'm just jumping to answers and I'm questioning him before he even gets to tell the story. I'm just like, okay, well, did you see the SUV that was parking in the front yard? He said, SUV? I said, yeah, the SUV. He said, bro, I didn't see no SUV in there. I said, you didn't see nothing parked in this front yard? He said, no, I saw a car though. I said, car? What kind of car was it? He's like, oh, just, a regular black sedan. He couldn't really tell because it was dark. I was like, okay. I was like, well, you did see the female in the dress, right? He looked at me again. He was like, female in the dress? I'm like, yeah. He said, no, man. I saw a tall, dark figure. Looked like it was a man just wearing a long jacket. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? I said, where's Jimmy at? He said, oh, Jimmy was standing in the driveway and he was facing towards this dude in the street, and it looked like they were talking. And I was just, it blew my mind. I'm like, what's going on? Like, I said, okay, well, you saw my car was parked next to Jimmy's, right? My door was open. I was sitting in there. And, he looked at me and he said, bro, I didn't see you in the video. And I just lost it there, man. I did not know what to think. I didn't know what was going on. I was just confused. I didn't, at that time, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what to believe. I didn't know what I saw. And I ended up asking Jimmy, got his side of the story, what he saw in the footage. He kind of told me the same thing. Also talked to his dad once more, and his dad said the same thing. His dad said that he only saw Jimmy in the front yard in the driveway standing there. So it was just this very, very crazy experience, just what I saw with my own eyes, not matching up to what my buddies and my buddies' parents saw in the video. It was just very, very creepy. I've never seen anything like that in my life. Definitely the scariest thing I've seen so far.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing it, Fabian. I mean, I think it's fascinating. I think it's really fascinating. I almost wonder, did you ever talk to Jimmy and say, did you ever talk to someone what they saw in the video as far as this tall black figure? Did you ever bring that up to him?
No, I honestly, I didn't, because I talked to my mom, I told, because she knew something was wrong with me. Again, this haunted me for about 2 weeks. And she told me, I think it's best that you don't talk with Jimmy, or, be associated with him anymore. And, I didn't really speak to him that much. I did kind of leave him alone, for a good bit. So, I mean, that was probably one of the last times I spoke with him at that time.
And I know he was into a lot of the dark arts. I know you had mentioned he was joining some church in California, some Satanist church or something.
Yeah. Again, that was about a year after we graduated high school. He's very talented. You can give him any instrument and he'll play it, and it's very beautiful. Musically, he is gifted. But, at the time, we heard a bunch of stories of people, selling their souls, doing this, doing that. And he was just trying to jump, trying to get that overnight success. And he heard about it. And, I thought he was BSing me until one day he showed me this contract that this church had sent him. And I didn't get really too detailed with it. I didn't read much of it, but I did saw, and I remember I talked to him about it, but at the very bottom, they're wanting him to sign. They want him to do a signature, but with his blood. And I just thought that was one of the most craziest thing, one of the most bizarre things I've ever saw, that like this thing was real. And I told him, you know, like, hey, like, you don't need to mess with that, bro. You're talent, man. If you just stay doing what you're doing, you know, something, you can get something, you know, out of this, you know, just with hard work. I don't think he ever went through with it. I'm sure he left that alone. I do know the one Ouija board he had, him and a buddy, they got rid of it the proper way, though, which I think is like you have to burn it or something. But yeah, he used to be, you know, really bad into that stuff. That's why when all this stuff was happening, you know, I had to sit him down like, hey, are you still messing with this? Because, you know, I need to know.
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's strange that she didn't show up on the video. That's a part that really creeps me out. That
I was definitely creeped out when my buddy told me that's all he saw, that there was no woman in that video. It creeped me out. It creeped me out, and it creeped me out so much that, I mean, up until like a couple years ago, like in 2016, I was scared that every time I would open up a door, like if I was leaving the house and I open up the door and she's right there waiting on me, that again, that stopped at 2016. You know, I got that out of my head, but up until that point, just every time I would open up a door, I was scared that she'd be right there waiting on me. Like, you know, if it was early in the morning or late at night, whenever I'd open the door, she'd be right there. You know, it really creeped me out. What helped me get over that, though, was a buddy of mine had told me, because I told him the story, and he told me, he's like, well, from what you're telling me, it looks like that whatever it was didn't want nothing to do with you if it didn't acknowledge you at all, which it didn't. He told me, you know, whatever that thing was, wanted Jimmy. So you're, as far as, you know, creeped on, you don't have to worry about anything. What she wanted Jimmy. So he was basically telling me I was safe, which I kind of, you know, which I believe, you know, it made sense. So that put me very at ease.
Yeah, it's bizarre, man. If I was there, I'd be like, no, I was there. There was a woman. You know what I mean? Like, you didn't see, you know, I would imagine just confusion on your part as far as you being like, the video's lying. I was there. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. And that's what I was trying to tell my buddy Xavier and Jimmy's parents, because, you know, they said I wasn't in the video. I'm just like, no, I was. I brought him home, you know, like, you know, it's very weird to me to this day. Definitely the creepiest thing that's ever happened, you know, and I saw this thing with my own eyes. So, I mean, it definitely opened up my mind that there's so much more out there in the world that we don't necessarily see. Just because we don't see it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. You know, I believe in the witching hour, that 3 o'clock or 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 o'clock. I believe that's a real thing, because this happened at 3 a.m., you know. I just feel like there are things out there lurking at times where we're not out as much, so we won't see some of the stuff.
Yeah, it's strange. She was in a car. I'm curious, was she solid or did she appear ghost-like at all?
She was definitely solid, but it was almost like she was possessed. It was almost like she was being possessed, because again, she never showed any type of emotion. Never. Almost like she was lifeless. The only time where I felt some type of, I guess, emotion, you know, for me, it was more of a vibe or as an impression, was when she was walking up the driveway, and the way she was coming up the driveway was with a purpose, like she wanted something from my buddy. Again, he didn't know she was staring at him until I told him whenever I was sitting out in the patio with him and his mom, and that creeped him out because he didn't know that. I said, yeah, she was staring. He said, she was staring at me? I was like, yeah, she was staring at you. That freaked him out even more, you know?
And I almost wonder if he ran into something after you left because, well, I don't know. It was pretty quick. I mean, you went to the bowling alley and he's right behind you. But, you know, in the video, it's strange. They don't see you in the video or the woman at all, but this other entity. And I almost wonder if he had some sort of conversation with something and he got freaked out and jumped in his car and followed. It's hard to say, man. I feel like Jimmy holds the keys. There's more to this story than what you saw. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's more going on here.
All right, there possibly could be, but again, I mean, man, the last time I talked to him was probably sometime last year, and I'm not trying to throw my buddy, under the bus, but it's almost kind of like he was always in, I guess, in trouble, you can say, and I don't know if he dug so deep into some of this, negative, or dark side, I guess you'd say. And, just kind of followed him to where, nothing's kind of going his way. But yeah, whenever I pulled out of this driveway and I went to the bowling alley, he was right there behind me. So I don't know. He could have been following me as soon as I pulled out, or maybe there was some type of gap in there whenever I left his house. I just know whenever I got to the bowling alley, he was right there behind me.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I know it's a Bigfoot show, but I really appreciate sharing it, Fabian. I mean, it's fascinating. It's like the two brothers I was telling you about and the woman in white. And I asked him I asked him on several occasions, was she solid? Was it a human being? And up until the point she vanished in front of them, they were like, yeah, we thought it was a homeless woman. We thought, she was always dressed in white. That's interesting. You talk about the purple dress. And it makes me really wonder. I bet Jimmy knows more than what he's saying.
Right. He probably does. And again, to be honest with you, me and him haven't spoke about that event in a very long time. I mean, it happened in late 2015. And me and him, we haven't talked about that in a long time. But I mean, I've told a few buddies of mine, a few friends of mine, and each person I've told, they immediately, they get the chills and they're locked into the story. And I'm not trying to get anybody to, necessarily believe me, because I know it happened. I saw it with my own eyes. I'm just telling, what I saw and what happened. But, the majority of my friends, they all believe me, I mean, I'm not the person, to, I guess, BS around when something like that happens. And again, it just lets me know that there is different things going out there. And when I hear someone else with a story or with a paranormal story, I like to give them the benefit of the doubt. They experienced it, and when they're telling me these stories, I feel like if I can feel them, if I can hear it in their voice, that they were frightened, and this kind of changed their life, then I know for sure this person's telling the truth.
Yeah, I would agree. I think once something happens to you, something strange, something weird, you're more apt to stop and listen to people. You know what I mean? It's just the way it is, our human nature. But it's a fascinating account. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing it, Fabian. Like I said, I know it's not a Bigfoot encounter, but I was creeped out the first time you told me the story, and so I'm so happy that you were willing to come on the show and share it. Thank you again.
Not a problem, man. Thank you. Again, I'm a big fan of yours. I'm glad you had me on. I'm a big fan of, Bigfoot and Sasquatch as well. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Well, next up on the show, I want to welcome Rich. Rich, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on, Wes.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here, and I know your encounter took place in kind of southwest Texas. If you would you just kind of start from the beginning, tell us what you were doing, and walk us into what happened?
Well, Wes, the area that I was, the name of the lake is OH Ivie, and it's kind of in the start of the Texas Hill Country. Kind of on the border of West Texas, heading towards Central Texas. And, I've always fished there as a kid, real familiar with the area, real familiar with the lake. Just a common spot for us to go and fish, really good fishery. And I had gotten a fish finder for Christmas that year. And I decided to take it out early January just to test it out, see what was going on. And so I decided to head to that lake and make a day trip out of it and just kind of piddle around. So I get on the water right around 11 a.m. As I'm getting in my boat. Another boat comes in, only people on the water that it's all other than myself, and they were there that morning and they decided to head on in. Just asked them if they caught anything. They said no, and so I got in my boat and piddled around, got in the creek, and was kind of trying to find some spots to fish. Of course, the fishing was slow, being January and stuff like that. So I decided to quit fishing and just start looking for some springtime spots, for the upcoming spawn. So I went to the other side of the lake, looked at a few places, and kind of spent the whole day just cruising around, looking at my Lowrance and stuff like that. And got to being later in the day, and I decided, you know what, I got a couple-hour trip home. I better head home. And it's kind of a routine that I normally do when I'm on that lake. As I head to the boat ramp, there's a main lake point that kind of sticks out in the water, and I always fish that point before I leave, kind of like a last ditch. Let me get a couple more casts in kind of thing. And as I'm fishing, the wind's kind of pushing me along the bank, and it's not too strong. It's a semi-overcast day, and I'm throwing a little spinnerbait on the bank, and I'm just kind of going around the point, just kind of drifting. And like I said, from where I was, I couldn't see the boat ramp, but I knew it was there. I had noticed some deer around the boat ramp, kind of at a 45-degree angle from the boat ramp at the opposite bank, and I was kind of watching them, and just kind of slow rolling that spinnerbait. And when I got across the point, I had thrown my spinnerbait towards the bank, and out of the corner of my left eye, I saw something moving, and noticed that it was black, and it's not uncommon to see people fishing on that bank. So, just kind of my mind thinking, I'm thinking, man, that there's someone there fishing. And so, I'm always trying to be courteous and, give people space, as they need it. I'm fixing the wave, and kind of get out of the way. And I noticed that it's walking, like it doesn't want to be seen. And it's kind of got its head, kind of facing away from me. And the best way that I can describe it is kind of like when you put a camera on something, you kind of see what it is, but it takes a minute to kind of focus. Well, that's kind of what my brain did. And I could see something look like someone wearing a hoodie, dressed in black. You hear that all the time. And then as I saw this thing and it was moving towards me, trying to get away, right when it got in front of me, I could tell like this thing was kind of acted as if you ran into somebody you really didn't want to see, and you're kind of looking to see if they're noticing you, but at the same time you're trying to get away, being unnoticed. And that's kind of how this creature acted. And like I said, as it got right in front of me, I'm probably 20 yards away. I'm 10 yards off the bank fishing, and he's probably 10 yards on the bank. So we're probably about 20 yards away, and I caught him in the wide open space there. But he was headed back towards the brush, and I noticed kind of like his right arm was kind of trying to shield his face. It's kind of like its head, and it was kind of, pointing away from me, but at the same time trying to look my way to see if I was noticing it. And like I said, when it got right in front of me, I kind of noticed that it looked like it had fur. And like I've told you before, it almost resembled like a javelina. It kind of looks like sometimes like its fur's kind of sticking up on its back a little bit, or kind of like a rat, or a mouse or something. When you turn the light on, you kind of see it kind of looks like the hair stands up on the back of their neck or whatever. That's really what it resembled to me. And again, I noticed it like on 2 feet, and I'm just like, man, what the heck is this? That's when I really started thinking like, man, that's not a person. And that wasn't even the scary part. Once it got to the bush, it's a bunch of scrub brush because the lake level there, it fluctuates so much through the summers and the fall that a lot of scrub brush kind of grows, and it's not really like trees, but it's just a bunch of tall scrub brush, and sometimes they get like 6 foot tall, and it grows in bunches, and sometimes there's gaps in between these, this scrub brush, and I'm almost certain that once it got to that brush, it stood up and looked to see if I was looking its way, and I could kind of see its silhouette in between the spaces in the brush. And I believe that's when it noticed me looking its way, and that's when it went full speed. And all I saw was just black flash in between brush. And I've never seen anything move that fast, and wasn't making any noises. And then it gets even with the point that I had fished, and it goes straight up the hill. And it's a pretty good sized hill because that's the hill the boat ramps on, so it's elevated quite a bit. And when it gets to the top of this hill, all I hear is just branches breaking. And I've never heard anything in my life like that before. The sound of the snaps, it was unreal. And in this area, we don't have huge trees, but we do have some big mesquites and oaks. And Some of them get pretty big for out here. And I mean, it's just the sound of these branches breaking. That's what scared me. That's when fear really, really hit my body. And I kind of just drifted, looking in that direction and just wondering. In my heart, I knew what I saw, but, your mind always tries to take you a different direction. But I just couldn't get over that sound of those branches. And so I'm drifting, and I finally get to the boat ramp maybe 5 minutes later. That's how close we were to it. And I was so scared I stayed at that boat ramp for about 30 minutes till I summoned the courage enough to get up and run to my truck and load up my boat. And I headed out of there. Like I said, the sighting is one thing, but just the noise of that of the branches breaking, that's really what shook me up, and just something I couldn't explain.
Yeah, I always wonder when they do that if it's more of a a display, like look what I can do and don't follow me type thing. I know you and I were talking about that off the air, but it's retreating. Why not retreat quietly? I almost wonder if it's like a display that they do as you.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, the more research I've done and just kind of listened to other people's encounters, I kind of had that feeling like maybe it was just trying to scare me, like, hey, don't come after me, because when it was running through the scrub brush and on the bank, you would think something that big, you would hear footsteps or something. Like it was pretty stealthy, for being right there in front of me. So that's why I thought, it was on purpose, purposely maybe snapping those branches.
I'm curious, is there any details that you remember? I know you bring up a black guy in a hoodie, and I hear that a lot, and I almost wonder if the hoodie's kind of, because of a conical head, kind of gives that appearance, and then they're all black, and they're upright on two legs. I understand why people say a black guy in a hoodie. When you really listen to behavior and stuff, none of that makes any sense, it being a human being. But was there any details that you remember?
The only details that I remember, not so much of the face. I just knew it was kind of looking away from me. But I did notice fur, like on the back of its neck, kind of, like it was sticking up, and it seemed to be all black, but at the tips maybe grayish, like it kind of changed colors slightly. And I noticed it was upright, and I could make out an arm kind of shielding its face. I could kind of see the elbow and it kind of, protruding back, So as far as details, those are the only details I really saw. Not really any facial features or anything like that. Couldn't make out any fingers on the hands or anything, but that's the first thing that popped into my mind. Not so much a conical, but I think because it had fur, up there around its face, it kind of made it look like it was wearing a hoodie. But definitely on two legs. That's really what stood out to me.
Yeah, it is. And it's fascinating, too, your description of it shielding its face. You hear of encounters where these things are constantly hiding behind things, trees, bushes, trying to conceal themselves and being caught kind of in the open. That's a very interesting detail. Did you tell anyone about this?
Yeah, when I first got home, I didn't mention it to anybody. I didn't tell my girlfriend. I didn't tell any family members until the next day. I was at my brother's house, and we got to talking about it. And I told him, I had seen something that I couldn't explain. And, of course, his first response was, well, maybe it was a bear, And I never came out and said, I think I saw Bigfoot. I just always said, I'm not saying that's what I saw. I said, I'm just saying I saw something that I can't think of what it was. And of course, just doing research on the area, there's no black bears in the area. It's very rare that they do migrate this way. And what I know now, like I've told you, I think you're crazier thinking or saying you saw a black bear in this area than maybe saying you saw a Bigfoot, knowing what I know now. But there's just nothing in the area that you could compare this to, and nothing that would make that kind of noise of those branches breaking.
Did you ever go back?
It took me over a year to go back, but me and my brother one spring decided to go, and it was the spring of 2016. And, like I said, that was a lake we frequently fished, and I fished by myself all the time. And to this day, I haven't been out there by myself, but, it's kind of funny on that spring trip, I was telling you, we went up that same creek, and that I'm real familiar with, and we went back in one of the cuts, one of the little drainages that goes into the creek. And one of the things my brother used to do to kind of as a joke, he used to, kind of let out a whoop. And I mean, the way he does it, it's very loud. It's very, guttural, and it's kind of a joke for a long time. He would do that, if there was people around and stuff like that, just to get people to think, what the heck was that, So we're in the back of this cut, and there's no one, in this creek. We're the only ones kind of fishing that area. And he does one of those whoops, kind of as a joke. And as he does it, we're both sitting there kind of laughing. I'm nervously laughing it off, of course, but 2 seconds later, we hear the same whooping noise answer back. And the laughter kind of turned to seriousness, and we kind of eased out of that cut. But that was kind of one of the things for me that kind of, to this day, I haven't been back. So.
Yeah, well, like I told you, you wouldn't think they're in that area because I know it's more of Southwest Texas, but I've actually gotten a lot of encounters from there. And, who's to say they're not there? They're in New Mexico. Why wouldn't they be in Southwest Texas? I've had the one encounter I can really remember is the FBI agents I was telling you about. They were coming back from training, and they were all in a line, and they were driving SUVs. And what's interesting is as they were coming back, they had actually, he said it looked like a big ape, came out of nowhere, started rushing the truck. They're definitely down there. I want to ask you, what do you think that Sasquatch is?
I've thought about it for a while, and, we talked about the kind of the primate tendencies that it has and the behavior that it has. I tend to think it's some type of primate, but it's definitely, advanced, just like I said, from what I saw, how fast it was. I mean, there's nobody that I can think of that I've seen that could be that quick and that agile and that fast. And like I told you, it wasn't huge, but it was big. It had to be 6 foot tall, maybe 250, 260, So, I mean, it was still a big creature, to be out there. So that's what I tend to think it is. But, listening to your show, I hear other people's encounters and the things that they've experienced. So you always keep an open mind to what it might be. But I think sometimes it's easier just to explain it that way,
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's the one that is kind of the go-to answer that makes the most sense. You know what I mean? Until you start really looking into some of the weird stuff. And after a while, after you hear some of the weird stuff over and over and over again, you kind of stop and go, I don't know. But you're right. I mean, a lot of its behavior is very much like a primate. It runs around on 2 legs, the way they react, the way they run off, the way they're territorial. I think in this case, maybe it was a younger one. You said it was about 6 foot?
Yes.
About 6 foot or so. So it might have been a smaller one. I think they generally run, I mean, that's not small by any means, but generally smaller than a lot of other areas like the Pacific Northwest. And he might have just, they might have been curious to see, get free fish. It's hard to say why he was down there. It's fascinating, though, the way they react when they know you're watching them. How you describe it walking off, kind of putting its hand over its face, kind of giving you the corner out of its eye, looking at you to see if you're looking at it. It's fascinating. You're right. It's advanced. If they're a monkey, it's an advanced monkey.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, the behavior, like I truly feel like it was trying to let me know, like, you don't want to follow me, or try to look for me, kind of thing. That's really what got me, the noise that it made. So like I said, if it is a primate, I do believe it is advanced. And, if there is a government cover up or whatever it may be, like you say all the time, how come there's no body and we haven't found it yet? That's kind of what leaves me scratching my head. But when you do come across one, it just kind of, it just leaves you with a million other questions, so.
Yeah, and I think when you see one, it gets real at that moment. You can hear about encounters, you can read about encounters, you can watch interviews, you can, but the moment you see it, it gets real at that moment. It becomes really real at that moment. People say, I'm a believer, or I'm a knower, or, whatever titles they throw out there. But until you see it, there's always that shock of like, holy crap, that's not a person.
Yeah, and I do think once you do see it, you have a million other questions, and finding your show truly helped me, because there's been so many encounters that I listen to, and the person says, I felt this way, or I heard this, or it looked like this, and I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, that's exactly how I felt. That's exactly what I thought I saw. That's exactly what, those branches sounded like, and, that's exactly how I felt at the boat ramp, kind of scared, and And so it's kind of helped me. And like I was telling you, I was reluctant to come on, but for me, it's kind of closure, and maybe my story helps somebody else, because reading the encounters, even on the BFRO in the area and different encounters in the area, it kind of helped me to say, okay, I'm not the only one that says they have saw one in this area. So it kind of helps you deal with it. And even to this day, I still think about it constantly, and just kind of, again, I have a million questions, so for me, it's a bit of closure, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing it. Thank you again.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Well, next up on the show, I want to welcome Garnett. Garnett, thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. And I know you had 2 encounters we're going to talk about tonight. And we'll talk a little bit about the property and some family members that potentially had encounters too as well. But take us back to your first encounter. What were you doing and what did you see?
So this was approximately 15 years ago. In the summer, my girlfriend and I were trail riding our horses across the street. There's a big dairy farm that's across from my home, and lots of fields, and it goes up through some wooded areas and a lot of hidden fields surrounded by woods. And there's a big creek that runs down through the whole property called Buffalo Creek. We were riding, and we had found this old trail. It used to be a road back in the 1800s, and we always liked to go down this old trail. And so we were coming down, and you had to cross a ravine and a little creek and then go straight up to the top of this trail. And my girlfriend was ahead of me, and she went across, and my horse kind of was slow, and she was crossing, and I looked up the ravine to my right, and I saw something black and kind of hunched down just for a few seconds, just 3 steps, and it was behind a tree. And I said to her, I kind of yelled up to her, I said, hey, did you see that? Or did you not see that? And she goes, no, I didn't see that. And I said, there was something black in a duck behind a tree. So we kept riding, and we got up to the flat part of this trail. There was, it's all in the woods. So there were tons of maple saplings on the side of either side of this trail. But on one side of the trail, probably 15 or 20 of these maple saplings, which were, maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches around, were all snapped off up high over our heads, and we were on horses. And they were all snapped off going in the same direction. And I remember we stopped, and I said, don't you think that's odd? I mean, you think a wind came in here or a storm, but it seems weird that it's only on one side of the trail. And we just exclaimed to each other, we just thought it was, the oddest thing that to have something like that. And, we found what I now know are little structures in the woods that we thought kids were in there messing around, just making these, like wooden teepee structures. We had no idea that it was, a sign that there might have been a Bigfoot in there. So fast forward to last year, 2018, on the 23rd of February, I was coming home from grocery shopping, and I was coming down our road, and I was going kind of slow, maybe 35 or 40, and I happened to look down into the fields, this farmer's fields, and I noticed someone walking. And I thought, well, gee, that's kind of funny. They're not, they don't have an umbrella. It was kind of misting rain. It was warm, but still kind of misting out. This person didn't have a walking stick, or I realized it didn't have a jacket on or jeans on or anything, but it was all black. And so I kind of slowed down to a stop, and I pulled over, and I just continued to watch this walk. And it was the oddest moving. It was walking natural, I guess, for itself, but it made it across this field. It was walking kitty corner away from me. It didn't see me up on the road. And it made it across this field quite fast. I had trail ridden over there, my whole life. Its arm swing was just bizarre, and it had a bent knee, just was odd looking. So in my mind, I'm thinking, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? And I decided to drive down to the neighbor's driveway, down to the farm driveway, and I drove all the way back, a couple little farm driveways, to this back field where I'd seen this thing walk. And I got out of my truck, and it's starting to rain now, and I walk up on top of this field, and I can see this thing walking away, and it's walking right along the wood line by this field, and I can see its head and massive shoulders and its back and its rump, and it started walking in more tall grass as it got towards the woods, and I couldn't see its legs so much, but then it dropped down into this ravine area where we always trail rode our horses through that area, and I will say they always were spooky in that area. Even when I was a young child, our horses were always spooky in that one particular area, and we could never figure out why. But, then all of a sudden the fear of God hit me, because I thought, here I am alone in the rain down in this field, and I think I just saw a Bigfoot. And, I came back across the street to my home, and I sat at my dining room table, and I just, had to wrap my head around what I had just seen, and I felt almost sick to my stomach. So that's, that was my account of what I had seen actually physically last year.
Yeah, strange. Any place really you don't go strolling through someone's farm. And I was reading in your email, didn't you say the farmer passed away?
He had just passed away like a week before this incident. So it was quiet over there. There wasn't anything going on. His daughter at the time was like 28 years old. She was the only one that was living at the farmhouse. So there was no one, there was no one going in and out of there, and it was, it's pretty private. So I just couldn't understand who would be walking straight across this big alfalfa field in February, and just happened to be that time of year that we had a thaw, so it was no snow, but just a brilliant green field and this big black, I thought, man walking across this field. But since then, I've had other odd, strange things going on, and
and I want to ask you. I want to ask you about that, and I don't mean to cut you off. I want to ask you about that. Before we get into some of the other things going on, how far is this field from your home or your property? I know you had mentioned you had taken the horses down in that area. Is this someone that lives close by?
Well, so the farm driveway is straight across from my house driveway. So if you leave my house driveway and drive straight across the street, you go right into their driveway, and, you can follow it down to the creek, and it goes through all these fields, flat fields, and, it ends up by the creek going through it. And so we always trail road through there lots, my whole life, my girlfriend, my children. And I think about it now, how many times I've been over there by myself, and it really creeps me out that this thing or these things could have been over there, and I had no idea. No idea.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, tell me about some of the weird things going on there. Some of the stranger, weird things that have been happening.
A few years before 2018, my mom, she lives behind my house. She built her home in a horse farm that we had. And she called me, it was in March, around 2:30 in the morning, frantically, telling me, hurry up, you've got to come up here. There is a black man standing at my back patio door, and he's trying to get in the house, and he's putting his hands all over the glass trying to figure out how to open the door. So, of course, I'm, just woken up, and I'm in shock, and I throw my clothes on, and I think, well, I'm just going to drive my truck up there behind her house with my headlights on to hopefully scare whoever it is away and see what's going on. So I get up there, and there's nothing there. We had patchy snow, so there wasn't really anything to look at tracks on the patio or anything. And I went in, and my poor mother's in the dark, and she's straight-faced and just in shock, and just was adamantly telling me how she had gotten up to go to the bathroom from her bedroom, walked straight across the hall, then came straight back across the hall, and she happened to glance down the hall into her dining room where this patio door was. And she saw this thing standing there, putting its hands all over the windows, trying to figure out, she said to me, well, he was trying to figure out how to get in. And at the time I thought, that's just really weird. If it's a man trying to get in your home, you would just grab the handle and try the handle. But she just kept saying, he just kept putting his hands all over the glass. And when I came up with the truck, it heard my truck, and it went right over the ravine. She said it took one big leap. Right behind her house is a giant ravine on the one side. And she said it just took one big jump down there. So my husband and I, we had flashlights. We looked all the way through there, nothing. And, I kind of thought for, the last couple of years that she was, maybe half awake or just not, or had been dreaming or, I really didn't take it super serious, but she was very adamant about it. And up until the time I had to put her in a nursing home, she insisted on keeping all of her doors locked in the middle of the day, and I always kind of laughed at her. I said, we live in the country. You don't need to lock your doors. Nobody's up here. And she goes, but I'm afraid. And so now that I've seen what I've seen, now I know what she was afraid of, for sure.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a man at her back door.
No, she said he was ducked over looking in. Now, the overhang in her patio was a good 8 feet. And so it was looking down and into the door, and she said it was like kind of looking in. She goes, it was a big black man. That's just how she described it. And
you hear that too. I know you've heard that before on the show, Garnett, that there's people in the South that say that. In the South, that's generally where I hear it. And when you really start questioning people and you really start trying to put together what they're telling you, it doesn't add up to a human being. I mean, this thing takes one step and jumps into the ravine. I'm a big guy. I'd probably break an ankle or something.
Like, 60 feet or more down, straight down, and, any human wouldn't for sure do that. But this was just gone. She said it just took one big leap and it was gone.
Have you ever heard any vocals in that area?
Yes, I just a month ago, in fact, I had my bedroom window cracked open a little bit in the night. It was a warm, breezy, really windy night. And I don't know, it was around 1:30 in the morning. I got woken up to this. It sounded like two men were hollering at each other way up in the fields behind my house. And I listened to it, and I couldn't understand who would be up there. It was a Sunday night. Who would be up there at 1:30 in the morning or so, I guess it would be Monday morning, hollering at each other. So I got up and I walked outside to my patio outside and I listened, and it just sounded so odd. It was like one, I think it was a Sasquatch, because you couldn't make out words. One would like do a shouting, like, ba, 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 like that. And the other one go, huh? Or what? And it's just like how it sounded. And they did this back and forth and back and forth. But it was very loud, so I don't think it was very far back in our fields. But I've only, that's the only time I've ever heard anything like that. And I've lived here my whole life, and I'm 54 years old. It just is scary because I don't really know, why they're here or, when they got here. They might have always been here. I don't know. But I've never encountered anything other than the last year here. And now, every once in a while I'll hear wood knocks across the street. Like all last summer I was hearing huge wood knocks down by the creek. In the middle of the day I'd be, down at my barn cleaning stalls, and you just hear this huge wood knock, and it would just echo up through the valley. And so by that point I'd, started listening to your podcast quite a bit, and I realized what that was. And I told my neighbor, and I said, that's a wood knock, and, kind of told her about it, and said, you should keep your eyes open and don't be walking your dog down there by yourself and stuff like that. So it was, it's been different.
Yeah, I wonder what drove him into the area, because you had lived there your whole life, you said, or for the most part, and it's just recently started. I wonder why.
I don't know, and I don't think they're here all the time. Like, I think they're here and they come in the spring, early spring, like last year. Like I said, I saw it in February. Although, like last week, we have flat stone or field stone retaining walls on either side of our driveway coming up our driveway and right by our door coming in. And one of my dogs knocked one of the big flat stones onto the driveway the other night as I was coming in from the barn. And I just picked it up and I just threw it back up on top of the top of the wall. And so, of course, it made this huge clack sound. And within 30 seconds, there was another big clack sound, but it was across the street in the ravine. And I thought, oh, my God, there's one, like, pretty much right there, you know, and it just gives me the chills. It really does.
Yeah, I don't blame you. It would give me the chills, too. I'd be real careful taking that horse out down in that area.
I'll
because...
never trail ride again ever across the street because I can't even imagine having one walk out in front of you when you're on a horse. Because I can't even imagine your horse would, you know, tip right over backwards or throw you off or, you know, you get dragged, anything. I can't even imagine it. It's too frightening for me to even wrap my head around. I also, my horses, I have 2 big pastures, one behind my house, and I live on a hill, so down the bottom of the hill I built a big horse barn, and there's a pasture behind that, and my horses, you know, when I let my horses out of my barn, they go up in this big pasture, but they can also cross over into the smaller pasture behind my house. And about 2 years ago, I noticed they stopped coming across, and I couldn't figure out why. And I had, you know, beautiful grass on this side and clover and everything for them to eat. And they would come over for just short periods of time, you know, 10, 15 minutes, it seemed grazing. And then all of a sudden, one would pick its head up and prick its ears up. And, you know, they'd get spooky. And all of a sudden, you'd see them all run right back across the ravine to the other pasture. I have a corral behind my house, and it was brand new. It was 4x4 posts, and I had 2x6x12 pressure-treated rails with 3-inch spiral nails. And my rail started coming down. In the middle of the night, I'd hear, you know, something pulling out my rail, and I thought, well, gee, it's the horses are up on this side leaning into it. It was in the summer. So I'd go out and I'd re-nail everything. A couple days later, they'd all be down again. But I started realizing when they were being taken down, they were all taken down in the same direction. So one side of the 2x6 would be on the ground and the other one would still be nailed on, and it would be in the same direction all the way across the back of the corral. And I got to the point where I just didn't nail them back up anymore. I thought, you know what, forget it. And my horses still don't go over there.
Yeah, I'd be real curious to look around to see if there's footprints or, you know, any other signs of them. It sounds like they're in the area, and my only advice to you would be careful. You know, if you want to get rid of them, you can do the old trick of putting up trail cams everywhere, and they tend to avoid those for whatever reason. But it does seem to work. It does.
That's
definitely.
what I should do.
The other thing, a Native American told me one time, and I've actually had a few witnesses tell me this. If you put sulfur around the property, they won't cross over it for whatever reason. It's bizarre.
Sulfur powder?
Yeah, like you get at a farm feed store. I had a Native American tell me you put it around your property and they'll avoid your property like the plague. And I didn't really give it much thought. And then I had another witness who told me that off the air, that he put sulfur around his property. And he said every time it rains, you got to go out there and do it again. But he said they stay away. It keeps them away. And I don't know why. I don't know the reasons why behind it, or it just seems to keep them away. It's bizarre.
Well, I know the girl that lives across the street, the farmer's daughter. She lives in that house by herself. And she's subsequently, in the last year, put up on every single corner of that big farmhouse motion detector lights, big floodlights. And when her dad was alive, I forgot to tell you this before, when her dad was alive, you know, he'd pop off a couple shots at 10 o'clock at night or, you know, shotgun shots, or 3:00 in the afternoon, or early morning, like 5:00 in the morning, and I'd wake up and think, what the heck, Alan? Why are you shooting? It's like April or it's June, or it wasn't hunting season. It's just bizarre, and I kind of wonder if these things have been over there and they, that was his way of chasing them off. I don't know. I remember going over one time because I was convinced he was shooting a couple of my barn cats, and he didn't. I said, "Don't shoot my barn cats," and he didn't really say anything. He goes, "Oh, I haven't been shooting your cats," but he never said that anything else. But since I saw that across the street, and now I know his daughter's put up all these motion detector lights, and I kind of wonder if she doesn't know that they're there, and I'd be afraid if I were her.
You might go talk to her and just say, "Hey, have you seen anything?" I know she put up lights everywhere. Usually that's a dead giveaway. I mean, people generally don't start slamming up lights on every corner of the house unless they're trying to watch for something. And her father reminds me of when I was in Texas and I was in this area and there was vocals going off. I mean, these things were screaming, chattering, on and on and on. Well, across the street from where we were at, there was a farm. And it was about 2:30 in the morning. He comes out, starts firing off a shotgun, I'm assuming in the air. I was telling all the people I was with, I was like, I hope he's not firing in this direction. But I think he heard it too. And I think he would come out there and do that to get them to stop
keep them away.
Yeah, keep them away.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to go talk to the guy, but they were telling me down there, you don't just walk up and start talking to someone out there out in the country like that unless you want trouble. And I didn't see trouble by it. I was just curious on why he was, I knew why he was shooting. I can put myself in his shoes. I probably would have gone out in the middle of the night, fired off a couple shots too to get them as loud as they were. I know he heard them.
Yeah, I mean, if it woke me up, for sure, a shotgun for sure, and what it sounds like. But he did that for a couple of years or so, and before I even gave it a thought that there was anything like this around. And I have a girlfriend that she takes care of a camp, a summer camp where people go, bring their camper trailers and things like that in. And I talked to her a couple of weeks ago, or it was probably more like in November, and she said, I said, "Oh, probably everything's slowing down. People are taking their campers home, and it's going to be kind of easy through the winter." And she said, I said, or maybe they stay and hunt. And she said, "Oh no, we don't allow anybody to hunt anymore because of all the nonsense that was going on up there." And so this is a town probably another 15 minutes east of me, even more rural than where I live. I said, "Well, what do you mean nonsense?" She goes, "Crazy stuff was going on." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She goes, "We were finding dead animals up in the trees, like deer, and just, everything stashed up in way, way high in trees." And she goes, "We thought, it was a bunch of crazy people killing stuff and taking it up there." She goes, "The thing is, their necks are broken backwards." And she goes, "Just grotesque way of the way these animals were killed." And so she just told me that in November, and it gave me the spooks for sure, because to walk through a woods and then see a tree or a few trees with dead animals hanging way up in it. So they stop people from hunting, but I don't know if anything's still going on up there in the woods where this camp is.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, it's definitely not a poacher. A poacher's not going to do that or put anything up in a tree.
No,
They're going to...
I can't imagine lugging a deer, 30 feet up into a big maple or oak tree,
Yeah, not going to happen. Not going to happen.
Wouldn't have the strength.
Yeah.
No.
Well, let me ask you, Garnett, what do you think that Sasquatch is? What is your own personal opinion?
Well, I've done some, lots of reading in the last year. I've contemplating the Nephilim and back and forth, and I feel like there's so many accounts from so many years, hundreds of years back. I just don't. They're not human, I feel, and they're not like an ape, but I think they're more like a Neanderthal type being. I don't know if they have supernatural powers or not. I've never had anything like that happen to me, although I do think that there's something to the infrasound, because sometimes when I'm in my barn and I'm cleaning stalls, or I'm just working around outside my barn, I've got an Australian cattle dog, and he's pretty wary of what's going on, and every once in a while he gets like, I want to say spooked, and he'll be a half foot behind me everywhere I go and acts like he's afraid. And I kind of wonder if he's not hearing something, and I just every once in a while I feel like there's something around. I just can't put my finger on it, and I don't want to sound like, I'm paranoid or anything. But the way the dog acts and the horses act, sometimes my horses won't, when I let them out from their stalls into the pasture by the barn, some days they just won't even leave the barnyard area. They'll just stay right down by the barn like it's safe. They don't even go up and eat or anything. So I really don't know what's around, but I'm going to get some trail cams for sure, and some sulfur now that you told me that.
Yeah, and you'll have to keep me up to date. I mean, I know, it's not paranoia. I would definitely keep an eye on your animals, because your animals will tell you when something is around. I just had an encounter on Friday, and he paid no attention to his dog. His dog wouldn't get out of the truck. It was laying on the floorboards and refused to get out of the truck. And, most dogs like to get out, run around. This dog refused to get out of the truck, and he ended up running into one of these things. So I think your animals will tell you, if you watch their behavior, they'll tell you when these things are around. And you'll have to keep me up to date. Let me know if anything else happens out there, will you?
Oh, I will. I'll let you know right away. But, I don't think that they're in our area all the time. I think they may migrate, because we're up here in by Buffalo, New York, and we get some really nasty winters, and I can't imagine anything that big eking out a living trying to eat here, because it's just, you get sub-zero, negative 20-some degree days, and, lots of snow, and I think they migrate maybe more south for a few months and then come back. But, I don't have proof of that, but I just feel like they're not here all the time.
Yeah, and then generally when people have these things on their property, I don't think I've ever heard anyone say they're here 24/7, 365 days. Generally, at certain times of the year, they'll come through for food or whatever else, but not that makes you feel any better. You know what I mean?
No.
Yeah.
I wish they would just go,
Yeah.
And I wish I would have never seen it, because I think about it now. I just think about it all the time. And, my husband thinks I'm crazy. I think I've gotten him pretty much where he believes, believes in it. But he's a farmer, and he's one that's like, if it's in my face, okay, I believe it. And I said, well, some night it might walk right up on our patio, and then you can take a look at it and shake its hand.
Yeah.
So,
no, I hear you. Well, you're definitely not crazy. They're definitely around, and they're definitely in. I've had a lot of reports from upstate New York, a lot. And I think, as you and I were talking off the air, I think a lot of people, or maybe it's just me, when you think of New York, you think of Times Square, you think of the city. And most people, upstate New York, there's a lot of areas that look like Washington State in upstate New York. Very rural.
Oh, yeah.
And
and it's wooded, and lots of fields, and across the street where these things are, it's very remote. Like, we used to call it hidden fields, because there's 3 or 4 fields that are completely hidden from view, and you have to just know the trail or the little driveway to get down into them. And then it opens up into a big field, but it's all wooded, wood-lined. But there's a big creek that runs through it. So, of course, there's water, fresh water for them to drink and stuff like that. And no one's really down there. It's a very secluded little farm. So I think it was a good place, if they chose it, to kind of hang out, for however long they are around. But I just think it's the most bizarre thing that we have them here in New York. I mean, I always thought they were in, a California, Oregon, Washington type thing. Yeah. And now I realize they're here.
Yeah, they're definitely there, Garnett. They're definitely there. I've had so many reports from there. Well, be safe. Let me know if anything else happens. And I really appreciate you coming on.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll talk to you later.
And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com.